Hey guys, Objector here, and recently we have some pretty big news for the esports community, and that is that the Halo 5 tournament in Aspen is going to be airing clips and highlights during the Aspen X Games on ESPN. So today we're going to be taking a look at the question of whether or not esports belongs on ESPN. This has been a big topic of discussion over the last couple years, and esports has had a lot of pushback. But this is obviously a big step for esports, and we're going to be talking about why esports belongs on ESPN and how this Halo tournament can help esports break out in the mainstream media. Now, Halo isn't the first esport to make it to ESPN. Last year, Dota 2 played on ESPN 3, but it was met with a huge backlash from the ESPN community with people tweeting things out like, "That's not a sport, come on son, hashtag ESPN, and ESPN 2 is seriously airing an online gaming competition." So ESPN received a lot of backlash from people claiming that esports isn't a real sport and thusly doesn't belong on ESPN. And a lot of the higher-ups in ESPN have come out saying that they don't think it's a sport and wanting to focus on real sports on ESPN. GameSpot did a recent interview with Kiki Wolfkill, who is the head of Halo Interactive Entertainment at 343 Industries, about ESPN airing this Halo 5 tournament. And if you want to see the whole interview, I'll leave a link down in the description below. But in it, Kiki is asked what it means for the esports community to be airing on ESPN, and he stated that he thinks esports is on the cusp of a breakthrough similar to how X Games was in the 90s. Now, if you don't remember, for a long time, X sports weren't considered real sports and weren't aired on ESPN. And yet now we have big stars like Tony Hawk and Shaun White in the X Games airing on ESPN quite a bit. And this just shows how esports change over time as people begin to recognize the skill involved, and even though the older members of ESPN who don't recognize these changes or try to fight against them, if enough viewers recognize esports, they will have no choice but to air it. Now, a big argument against esports is the lack of physical activity, but let's take a look at some of the non-athletic sports ESPN does air. We have Texas Hold'em in the World Series of Poker with a ton of airtime, but they also air things like cup stacking, bowling, pool, golf, and even the National Spelling Bees from time to time. Now, these are obviously not athletic sports, yet they have not received the backlash that esports has, even though they lack of team facing off against team that esports inherently have. Now, these sports do have a lot of skill and technique involved, and even though they aren't the traditional sports, and I'm not taking anything away from them. But specifically, I want to look at poker, because out of all these non-traditional sports that ESPN airs, it's probably the biggest, and while I won't argue that poker doesn't have some level of skill required when it comes to analyzing cards and bluffing and reading opponents, but the cards themselves are always random, so regardless of the skill involved, a huge part of the game does have this inherent randomness involved. With esports, we don't have that randomness. It's entirely skill-based, and everything that happens is a direct result of player choices and of strategy and skill. It's hard to see why esports is receiving such a backlash that it has with all of this in mind. I think part of it is that most people don't understand the games enough to see the skill and strategy involved. They're probably sitting there on their couch thinking any teenager can pick up a controller or a computer and play. Why is this a big deal? Whereas if they've played poker and probably lost a lot of money doing so, they see these people making a living out of it and going, "Oh wow, I can't do that. They must have a lot more skill than I have." And they don't understand that these players on the esports circuit has 8 hours or so every day of practicing and playing with their teammates until their strategies and metagames develop and change, and they have to adapt and develop new strategies. But most non-gamers don't know or understand this hard work that they put in when it comes to developing skill into gaming. And I'd even say a lot of casual gamers don't understand this either. Now, regardless of your personal view on all of this and whether or not you think esports should or should not be viewed as a sport, what ultimately anything showing on TV has to do is bring in the views. If a show doesn't get a lot of views, it's not bringing in money, it's not going to be shown. So let's take a look at some of the numbers of these viewerships. The League of Legends World Championship, which is shown through online outlets such as Twitch, I think even League of Legends has its own viewing port, but receives between 27 and 32 million viewers depending on the year that you look at. And that doesn't count all the views of breakdowns and highlights on YouTube or the people who are actually there in the arena live. League of Legends is now selling out these massive arenas that just keep growing each and every year to watch the players live on the massive big screens up behind them. But even just by looking at these numbers of those watching it live on stream on their computer in their home, This is more than NBA finals receive each year, which usually hovers around the 20 to 27 million views each year. Yet basketball is considered a big sport with a huge following and worth showing on ESPN. And it's important to note that these views for esports are by people who have to look up the game on Twitch or MLG and know when it's on and actively search for it and find it, as opposed to the views on TV where people are just kind of surfing through the channels and nothing's on. Oh, I'll watch this football or basketball game that's on. So I would say it's far more difficult to get views online than it is for TV right now. So obviously there is the viewership numbers to support esports on ESPN. Now of course League of Legends is the biggest viewership, and that's why I'm using it, and I think people that play the game can see the level of strategy and calculations involved in it, but it's because they understand the game to a certain level and play it themselves. But I think first-person shooters like Halo, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, and so on has the potential to be viewed on ESPN if we get good analyzers and commentators who know the level of skill involved and can help explain what's going on to the general viewership who aren't gamers or are casual gamers who don't quite understand what goes on into these games. And that could be a big problem with placing MOBAs like League of Legends and Dota on TV. While these games do have the biggest viewership right now, it requires a certain level of knowledge to understand what's going on and appreciate the skills involved. Even though I do play League of Legends casually and I watch the highlights from the World Championships, I simply don't know enough about the game to be interested in watching full matches and appreciate what's going on without rewinds and commentators telling me why something was such a big move in the mid-game. First-person shooters I think is a little easier for new people to see the level of skill and strategy involved. I think that's why you'll see more of Halo and Counter-Strike on TV before you see these complex games. That to a casual viewer looks like a bunch of random clicking and just a big mess of minions and champions that it's really hard to understand what's going on there. So e-games are competitive, they do require skill, strategy, and practice, and they have a large number of viewers. All of these things point that they should be successful if aired on TV. With the information we have, there isn't really a question of if esports will end up being successful on TV, especially with the growth of the geek and gamer culture with the rise of shows like Big Bang Theory. So the question becomes, who is going to be the first to jump in on it? It seems like ESPN has some interest in it with airing this Halo tournament. I think this tournament could be a huge step up for esports. And I wouldn't be surprised to even see an MLG or similar channel in the future that only does esports coverage and analytics. Halo is a good choice to get esports out there because even non-gamers have at least heard of the Halo franchise. It has bright colors, teams are easily recognizable, and people unfamiliar with first-person shooters can easily see the communication, time, and skill involved, and commentators can easily point out big plays in an understandable way for the average viewer. So that's all for this video, guys. Esports has been growing online for years, and I agree with Kiki Wolfkill that this could be a beginning of the outbreak for esports on a much larger scale with the mainstream audience. And it's also good for the Halo competitive scene, which has always been an important focus of the community, but really dropped off with Halo 4. This is definitely a step in the right direction for Halo 5 and the franchise as a whole to bring competitive first-person shooters back. Are you guys excited to see esports becoming more mainstream? Let me know in the comments below. If you haven't seen my video on the best sensitivity for Halo 5, click the link on the screen now. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Objector, signing off.